comparing to like cities. We certainly did, before Measure E, we did a consultant, this fellow McCrary, did a review of our police department and made a lot of recommendations that we did almost none. I think we need to dust that thing off and because that was a way of tightening our belt. He made recommendations for tightening our belt. I have thought that the sheriff feasibility study was a baseline. It's a different model, but at least that gave you a kind of a minimum level of service and what that would cost, but I don't think that's what our residents want. But I don't think that Measure E, passing Measure E, I don't think was a referendum by the voters to the city council to spend away. I think they expect that we were going to tighten our belt and make the department more efficient, which I think we need to do.
Thank you. All right. Next question. Our city's annual cost for public safety has been variously analyzed as at being somewhere between 3.5 and 4% higher than other cities on the Hill. Whether you look at per capita issue or per home, cost per home or cost per acre. We've just signed an MOU that gives our police an annual raise in excess of our revenue projections. Do you believe that this is an issue? And if so, how would you manage cost escalation within our police department going forward? Michael, we'll start with you if you want to take a crack at that.
I just didn't understand. I was actually at the last city council meeting because I was there for a development issue. And I heard this going on. First of all, it was barely off the consent agenda, but that's another issue. Secondarily, I didn't understand why we were facing a 4% increase to the police that absolutely deserved compensation. But why does it all, every time we make a change, why does it have to be pensionable? Why can't we give bonuses in order to acknowledge and say thank you? Why can't we create the equivalent of a 401k, which in government is a 457 plan, to allow people to put money away for their futures without strapping our city with never-ending debt and then depending on Gavin Newsom to attempt to repair the problem, which is funny in and of itself. So we just have to change our methods. We have to change the way that we are fundamentally accounting and handling our city. Otherwise, the runaway pension train is going to go through the roof.
Thank you. Betty Lynn?
The police department, due to the failure of Measure D, they picked up 4% of their pension liabilities. They didn't ask for anything in return. And for us to keep our service level as it is and worry about competing with the other agencies that are around us, you know, El Segundo's offering 25% signing bonuses, Torrance is doing very similar things, Ingle was doing very similar things. How do we keep our people that are qualified, that have been here for years, dedicated their services to our city, how do we keep them? How do we motivate them to stay? And I understand that there's a pension cost to this, I do. But when you weigh everything together, sometimes you have to make the tough decision because we did pass Measure E. We did want to keep our police department. So we have to try to keep our best people. And I do agree with maybe there's a different way of doing pension or a different way of a retirement account, but that in itself also has to be competitive. So the council considers this all the time. Every time we have an MOU for any labor negotiations, we consider that. But we want to keep good people so we can keep the best service.
Thank you very much. David?
I think the issue with the police department is, again, going back to look at the way in which we do business and are there other ways that we might be able to achieve the same service levels in an alternative fashion. The issue I had with the most recent MOU was not the amount of money that we gave the officers, but it was the way in which the information was presented to the city council and to the public. Number one, it was not reviewed with the Financial Advisory Committee. And number two, it only reflected the current year's cost ramifications and not the tail associated, as been talked about, with the pensionable asset or pensionable salary. I do think there are alternative ways that we can look at bonuses and other types of incentives for our officers, but yet we need to maintain the competitive environment and our level of service that we all desire.
Thank you. Kevin?
I agree with Dave. I was disappointed with the report that it didn't extrapolate out the cost for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. I mean, it's just information that everybody needs to understand and just for transparency. And I like Michael's idea of, you want to compensate the officers, but maybe there are different methods to compensate them outside the pension system, so that's all.
I made a bunch of little notes to myself here, so I don't know if they're organized very well. You know, I guess I feel that, you know, as a person working in corporate America, you know, a little bit of a reality check here. You know, when I first came in, I think we used to pay the city's portion. Think of the retirement as like Social Security, right? I mean, you pay in 7.5%, your employer pays in 7.5%. But for a long time, when CalPERS, was doing well, you know, the city paid their portion and they paid the employee portion. Then times weren't as good. So then we asked the employees to pay their share. Well, when I came in as treasurer a couple years ago and I looked, we asked them to pay 2% more and then gave them a 2% raise. And I thought, oh, you know, in corporate America, that's not how that really works. So I think it's a great place to work. We want to retain good employees, but we really haven't, you know, they don't leave off. I think there's just a reality check. And I think, like the rest of us in corporate America, that an employee, I mean, I can't think the last time I had a 4% raise. Not in, you know, I mean, I get nice bonuses, but I don't know, 2% raise is pretty good in this world. So I don't know. I think there's a little reality check even for our officers.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Our officers over the past 5 years have had a total of a 4.5% increase before this recent 4% increase. They are underpaid in every category at every level, about 10 to up to 20, maybe even over 20% from our neighboring cities. So yes, we did, and we've been in labor negotiations 4 months over this. And without disclosing anything that goes in there, I can just tell you as a general principle, if you don't reach an agreement in labor negotiations, the next thing you do is you go to fact-finding. And that's a very expensive process. And given how underpaid our officers are relative to our other cities, that fact-finding would not have resulted favorably to us, and it probably would have cost the same amount as the raise cost. I think there was a second part to your question, which was how would you manage the cuts going forward? And again, our chief, when he was sworn in, he committed himself to streamlining and maintaining efficiencies in his department. And so I would turn to him and I would say, how best do you think that we can achieve a certain percentage reduction in your budget? And that's how I would manage it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, one last question here. This particular question had the honor of being the very first question that we received when we announced this thing. And the question is as follows. We live in a semi-rural environment and share our city with a number of other living beings, including coyotes. Coyotes can be a danger to domesticated animals such as cats and dogs, as well as other things. What are your thoughts regarding our control and or coexistence with these animals? And Betty, I'll start with you.
First of all, I'm an animal lover, so it's very hard for me to say, well, let's just kill them off, because that actually doesn't happen. We've had studies come in front of the council saying that if you remove a dominant coyote from an area, then the other ones come in. So then it begs the question, are we overdeveloping? Maybe not us, but our neighbors overdeveloping, such as, you know, the Butcher Solana Canyon, right? So they want to put 284 units in there, and whatever's living in there that's getting their natural habitat taken away might be coming up on the hill. So I think the focus is not just coyote control, but maybe we need to also talk to the city of Torrance, making sure that that property doesn't get developed, so then the coyotes have somewhere to live. And then, unfortunately, you know, small animals, sometimes you just have to keep them inside the house. I really don't know what else we could do besides protecting our own animals from being attacked by coyotes.
Thank you. David?
Well, also, having pets in our home, we are concerned about the coyotes and leaving our little dog out, even in our fenced-in backyard. But as far as overall plan for the coyote management issues in Palos Verde Estates. I'm not up to speed on it. I'll be the first one to admit that. I have not studied the issue. I don't know what the options are, and therefore I'm not going to make any other opinion other than the fact that I am concerned for our little dog Coco.
And Coco appreciates that.
As she does.
Kevin?
I have 2 little dogs, and I would volunteer to let them go out and roam around and try to catch these coyotes. But I'm in favor of trapping. I mean, you know, we live up in the Peacock neighborhood, and the city maintains a flock of, I think, it seems like 40 or 50, but it's like 22. And so, and they really don't do anything unless you call and you complain. You call and you say, hey, I got a lot of peacocks, and I'll have anywhere from 8 to 10 peacocks in my yard at any time. And the kids like them, and I clean up after them, and it's fine. But at the end of the day, I think if there are coyotes and they're hurting our animals, or we're afraid for our kids, we need to trap.
Victoria?
And I had a resident ask me about this recently. I'm sort of famous. People who know me know that I kind of equate most of life to a bell curve, and you have the extremes, and you know, the people who want to trap and kill all the coyotes, and people who think that every single one of them should not ever be touched. And most of life probably happens in the center of the bell. I do know, again, last couple years of city council, I think this topic's only come up once, and it probably was about 2 years ago, and it was more to talk about the tracking portal on the city's website. So it's a concern. It comes up. It's been coming up more and more often. So I think because it's a concern, we need to get it back on an agenda. We need to talk about it. I think it would be awful to feel like you were trapped in your house because there might be a coyote outside, or that you're awful that you're trapped in because you have to keep the dog in because, what's going to be outside. I think that Torrance, City of Torrance is I think this is probably why this is coming up again, because Torrance, but again, until the residents had an uproar, didn't want to deal with it either. So I think maybe we need to put this back on an agenda for a community discussion.
Great, thanks. Jennifer?
Police Captain Tony Best is in charge of this area, and he's been to several regional trainings, and he's put a lot of information on our city website, and I would encourage whoever asked the question to go look at that. Because a lot of the management, as was said, if you trap them or if you kill them, if you take them out of their environment, another coyote or more coyotes come in to fill that void. So what we've tried to do is focus on what we as residents can do to keep the coyotes away. And so there is a lot of information on our website. Again, it's keeping pets in, it's keeping pet food in, not just in a garage, but closed and locked away and sealed, and things like that, basically eliminating the attractants. So I hope that whoever did ask that question will take a look at that, and so that you can help protect yourself from the coyotes.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Last but not least, I'm actually going to share the story with Dave and tell you that I think you should hang on to Coco because I actually lost a cat. It's challenging because as hard as it was and is to lose pets, our ecosystem requires balance. And I'm not in favor of constant trapping for all the reasons that have been said above. So I'd be open to looking at it. Victoria, I like your nothing at the fringes argument. I'd be happy to have a community conversation and pay attention to it because it is a concern. But having been on both ends, both of caring about animals, et cetera, but also having lost one, I get it.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to a different topic area right now, focusing on parklands and housing density, which is another topic that's been in the news lately. So the next questions are going to focus specifically on that. And David, I think you'll be up for the first one here if you want to take a shot at it, which is, as part of the recent settlement, the city agreed to reaffirm the continuing legal validity of the protective parklands restrictions that set aside parklands in perpetuity for communal use and benefit of PVE residents for public recreation only. Would you pledge here tonight that you will support and enforce the parklands protective deed restrictions?
Without a doubt. I think it's evidenced by the fact that I've spent the last 10 plus years in the city of Los Angeles, because that's where I worked and spent most of my time off the Hill during the day. And I've been committed to the Los Angeles Parks situation where we've raised over $33 million to return to the parks in the past 10 years. And I'm a strong believer and supporter of parkland, and I believe that we need to keep it into perpetuity.
Thank you. Kevin?
My wife and I lived in Redondo Beach down in the Esplanade. We rented on the beach in Esplanade in our early years, And we always looked up on the hill and said, that's where we want to live one day. And it took us 3 houses, but we finally get up here. And one of the reasons we moved up here is because of the parklands. We treasure our parklands. You know, we've been to the parks with the kids. We've done the soccer. We've done the whole thing. So I would do everything in my power to maintain all the parklands.
Thank you. Victoria?
Really agree as well. Yep, I think when you come into the city, I think that's the first thing that you get, the feeling that, you know, you realize you've come into a city that's kind of special and unique because you can feel the openness. So, absolutely, I think the parklands are important. I think it's what makes us special and unique. We have to keep them as they are, unencumbered, unencroached, and yeah.
Great, thank you. Jennifer?
The simple answer is yes. In the settlement agreement, the city was very happy to reaffirm the deed restrictions and was even happier that we were able to achieve a gain of additional net parklands by imposing those deed restrictions over the 4 acres in Bluff Cove.
Great, thank you. Michael?
You know, many will tell you that our council members are heroes for signing that poison pill settlement agreement. I don't want to get into all the history of all of it, but a quick one is that simply a judge said that the city's actions were illegal. I absolutely will commit to you to make wise choices, and I'll never sell your parkland. I also commit to supporting and protecting our CCNRs and our deed restrictions. That goes into ADUs and others. Hopefully you'll have some questions on those. But I really believe that the Homes Association and the city needs to have a much closer arrangement rather than battling each other, selling parkland, and suing each other over it.
Betty?
Our parklands is one of our most treasured amenities. My husband and I hike our parklands with the kids all the time. Of course, absolutely, I will swear to protect our parklands, as it was shown in our commitment to try to settle, to make sure that we actually have a net gain of parklands and also not keep wasting money on litigation. So, yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you very much. This next question sort of has a kind of 2 parts to it, so stick with me on this. What will you do to support, protect, and enforce the city's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or more commonly known as CCRs, in the face of growing challenges from outside entities, such as the state of California, who may seek to restrict cities, not just Palos Verdes, but all cities, authority to make local decisions regarding housing density, cell phone tower placements, etc.? And as an example of that, I know that the City Council is considering allowing ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units, on 25% of the lots, and JADUs, junior accessory dwelling units, on all lots, even though the CCRs forbid it. What is your position on ADUs and JADUs, and why? So, Kevin, we'll start with you on that.
Okay, so to know where you're coming from, we've had a couple of double lots, single homes on a double lots in our neighborhood, and general contractors have come in and built beach houses on both those. And I'm in favor of some type of sealing or freezing the double lots so people can't put these double houses, these beach houses, because the one they built around the corner from us is basically butt ugly. The
That's a technical term.
yes, I got it from one of the engineers.
Yeah.
No, the bottom line is I think we need to have our ordinances as strict as they can be, as long as they abide by the state law, not to allow the Sacramento to influence any of our building codes.
Great. Victoria?
I think this came in front of the city council 3 times, 4, 3, I guess. And I remember the first time listening kind of to the staff report and thinking, what on earth are they talking about? And then the light bulb went on and I thought, oh my gosh, they're talking about the whole state of California being 2 on a lots. You know, I had this vision of kind of North Redondo and Hermosa, you know, and I thought, oh no. You know, for me, this issue and having the controls that we want to have, I think it's just super important that the city and the Homes Association be working together. You know, both organizations represent the same constituents, that's us. And to me, this is an example where I feel like the work that the city staff did was really not very good. It wasn't solid. I didn't think it was professional. I thought what they put in front of the city council was awful, and my only conclusion was that maybe they were hoping that the Homes Association and the CCNRs would somehow backstop a bad code on the city side. So I think and the city and residents, of course, came in an uproar. So we need to relook at this thing, rip it apart, and make sure we have the most Sorry, George.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I got dinged.
There is a housing crisis in California, and as a result, the state is enacting legislation that requires cities to increase their housing. One way they're doing that is through the addition of ADUs. But cities do have some leeway, and so what the city council is trying to do very carefully through multiple meetings is enact the most restrictive ordinance possible while complying with state law. And so we have an ordinance that limits ADUs to a certain lot size, to a certain height. We're trying to comply with all our building codes as well. And so it's taken a long time. We are trying to strike a balance because once we enact that ordinance, it does have to go up to Sacramento for approval. So we are trying to be very careful with that. In terms of the CCNRs, the city doesn't enforce the CCRs. The Homes Association enforces the CCRs. And it certainly is possible that an ordinance that regarding ADUs will be barred by the CCNRs, but that is something that will be fought in court. And that's the Homes Association fight. It's not ours. I really don't want the city to pay litigation expenses to fight the Homes Association fight.
Thank you. Michael?
I don't know about you, but I want to preserve the character of our city. The state of California is forcing its increased density demands on municipalities across our state. Our council directly collaborated with our city attorney and created this ordinance that everyone's been talking about. And that ordinance would allow a large percentage of our lots to add a secondary dwelling to those properties. We all moved here because we cared about the CCNRs and we care about the integrity and our open space in our city. My position is that our residents enjoy a homes association with covenants and restrictions, and this makes the character of our city unique, and those CCNRs are defensible. I understand the cost issue, but hell, we just fought over parklands for 6 or 7 years, so I understand. We need to support our homes association, not ignore them because they're another organization. We're the same exact residents. So my position is until such time as our CCNRs are litigated and or this happens in somewhere else in the state, that we have no need to develop an additional ordinance that we have to have Sacramento approve. Our residents don't want these rules imposed. Stop the madness. 10 seconds.
Thank you. Betty Lynn?
Just to clarify, as of right now, everyone can actually build an ADU on their property because this is what the state told us to do.
No, they can't. The Homes Association stopped
Michael,
it.
hang on. Michael, not a debate.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys.
Thank you.
What the council has been trying to do is to make it the most restrictive. Yes, we're a constituent that answers, we have two bodies of government. But if we don't comply with the state, they can sue us, because Gavin Newsom is suing Newport Beach for the exact same thing, and they can pull our funding. So what do we do as the city council? We have to protect our residents. We have to protect our properties, which is by putting the most restrictive but acceptable restrictive rule. So yes, maybe there's 25% of houses or of properties that gets to build, but the other 75% don't. And so less likely to be challenged. If somebody wants to build on their property an ADU, and then our ordinance says you can't unless you meet a certain criteria, they're less likely to sue us and sue the Homes Association. So we kind of cover both of our behinds with one ordinance. Because yes, they can build. Yes, they might have to sue them, but they can build.
Okay. Thank you. David?
Yeah, I'm not as up to speed on the ADU issue as I would like to be because it's fairly new. But what I'm concerned with right now is that we look to other cities in the state similar to ours and how they have defended themselves against keeping the covenants as restrictive as possible. I fully support that if we have to, we're not going to lose state funding, but we're going to want to put together a strategy that keeps the minimal amount of impact to our residents on the ADUs and the JADUs. I think that we could potentially want to look at other legal sources that have worked in other parts of the state to benefit from their knowledge as well. I have not seen but one legal advice on Palos Verdes Estates to date.
Okay. Great. Thank you.